James Marshall spotted something glinting up at him in the water. Flakes of pure gold. The discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill is one of the most significant events in American history.
I think there is a desire among some of the initial gold seekers to kind of try and keep this under wraps, but it doesn't work.
By 1849, word gets from California to East Coast newspapers, and hundreds of thousands of people rush to California.
Lured by the promise of instant wealth, these gold seekers became known as the 49ers.
They have given up a lot and invested a lot to get there. They're giving up their jobs, their homes, their families, but the average take home was about $20 a day. There was scope to increase your wealth by 10, 15 times. That dream is real.
A homemade gold lottery has been rigged up. With gold now at $33 an ounce, is showing a nice profit. Boys, there's gold in that star pan.
The discovery of gold not only made people rich, but transformed California beyond recognition.
The gold rush has a dramatic impact on California. It introduces a huge amount of gold into the economy. It sets off a myriad of economic consequences, so it leads to banking, agricultural, manufacturing growth in California.
In 1852, the peak year, $81 million worth of gold was pulled from the ground.
Whole industries spring up in California. Levi Strauss begins making his very famous blue jeans, Levi's, as clothes that these workers need when they're mining. So California really gets set up to become the economic powerhouse that it now is today.
It's a massive transformation socially and economically of the West Coast, but also really of the United States. The 49ers become renowned figures in the history of California. I mean, the San Francisco 49ers, the American football team, emphasizes how this generation of gold seekers become enshrined in myth.
Your uncle, he was a spy. And I think you are too.
A life-changing mission begins.
We are a specialized subdivision of the British Secret Intelligence Service.
We've created a cover identity for you.
As the young agent goes undercover.
Point blank, it's a school for troubled teenagers. Welcome to the family.
Into a world of unknown dangers.
These people aren't your friends.
You have to fight your own battles. Why are you lying to me, Alex?
Alex Rider, Wednesday night at 10:30 on viu96.
Three, won't get it to Kobe. Flying in. Back to Brown.
NBA Game of the Week. Phoenix Suns versus Boston Celtics. Saturday morning, live on View TV.
This is an Italy that's more than just great food. The smell that's coming from this ragu is actually really good. It's about the people and their stories. This is an Italy I've never seen before. About a 20-minute drive just outside Verona is the small town of Bartolino, which sits on Lake Garda. Federica and Fausto are the torchbearers of family tradition, and as fifth-generation winemakers, they are proud of their family's past, and also their region's rich history of wine. The Verona Arena is quite spectacular. It's a Roman amphitheater which was built in the 1st century to host sporting events for the gladiators. Today, it hosts concerts and events and is home to the Verona Opera Festival, the oldest in the world. Marissa is a local artisan whose bead stringing shop has helped preserve Venice's historic craft.
And this was literally the gold of Venice.
It was like currency.
Oh, absolutely. With 4 of these hunks of glass beads, you could buy a slave.
David Rocco's Dolce Italia. Thursday night at 8 on viu96.
In 1,000 years, America has come to dominate the world with its military might.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
As New York evolved into a financial epicenter.
I don't know, you gotta give me a second!
And the discovery of gold in 1848 transformed the wealth of the nation forever.
What happens is that America really gets set up to become the economic powerhouse that it now is today.
The gold rush was also responsible for revolutionizing another key aspect of American life: transportation.
One thing that the gold rush reveals is how far away California is, and it's one factor in these growing calls for a transcontinental railroad to try and connect up the East and the West Coast.
In 1862, work began on its construction. Over the next 7 years, two companies would race to meet each other, laying over 1,770 miles of track. From California on one side and Nebraska on the other. When they finally met in Utah in 1869 and drove in the final spike, uniting the two tracks, it marked the birth of a new age.
The Transcontinental Railroad is a critical moment, I think, in terms of American expansion. It enables people to get across the country much quicker. And it has a huge economic impact in terms of being able to move things around the country and ship things overseas at a time where America is growing industrially.
The railroad provided the basis for such a rapid expansion of American industry that by 1890, just over 250 years after the Dutch took over Manhattan, the US had become the most powerful economy on the planet. It also made some individuals filthy rich.
Robber barons is a term that's applied often quite negatively to these huge industrialists and capitalists in the late 19th century.
The robber barons were the men who controlled these railroad corporations. The cast of characters included Jay Gould and Cornelius Vanderbilt, and really prominently J.P. Morgan.
More familiar to us today as a modern investment bank in London's Canary Wharf, the financial giant actually owes its fame and fortune to the American Railroad.
J.P. Morgan came to control about 24 railroad companies towards the end of the 19th century, which gave him command over about 1/6 of all the railroads in the United States. This is really the beginning of big corporate business.
It is a time of great wealth, but really for the few. You see a widening gap between the haves and the have-nots in America.
As these massive corporations made their millions and created a wage economy, employees found themselves with disposable income. With the dawn of a new millennia, America was about to experience her most prosperous decade yet.
The 1920s are the Roaring 20s. I mean, it was made famous by these images of flappers and all-night parties, jazz, Art Deco design.
America's obsession with wealth and success was bearing fruit. The country's economy was thriving, and this land of plenty was turning the American dream into a reality.
500,000 new jobs are predicted into almost every line of business and commerce.
It seemed like the good times would never stop.
The 1920s lit up, literally. It was the time in which electricity really got going and sparked an incredible amount of mass production.
You've got factories, producing consumer goods, producing cars and all the rest of it.
The most famous person to profit from the electricity boom was Henry Ford. He installed the first ever moving assembly line for the mass production of his Model T Ford car.
The battle against wasted time was being won. The cars began coming off the assembly line at the rate of 1 every 40 seconds.
His innovation reduced the time it took to build a car from more than 12 hours to just over 90 minutes.
Model T car sold in the millions. So America was really able to fuel its economic dominance.
Industrial growth in America doubled during the 20s. Employment and wages were soaring. People had more disposable income than ever.
This is precisely the moment, and you've got this wealth of consumer culture that America becomes the exemplar of.
And spurred on by advertising and new forms of credit, Americans spent and borrowed like they'd never done before.
Mass goods become the way of the land. You see people buying refrigerators, mechanized washing machines, and if you can't afford a brand new refrigerator, it's no problem. You can put it on credit, and for a lot of Americans, this sends them, of course, spiraling into debt.
America was about to discover the true price of its prosperity.
In 1929, it turned out that what seemed to be a boom was actually a bubble, and the bubble burst.
On the 29th of October, 1929, a day now known as Black Tuesday, the US stock market crashed. As panic set in, 16 million shares were sold for a fraction of their value. The fruits of America's agricultural and industrial revolution had been wiped out in an instant.
They found out that what they were trading was literally pieces of paper, and that the value behind that only existed if the market itself was healthy.
New York, the richest city in the richest country in the world, found itself bankrupt, politically as well as economically.
Billions of dollars were lost, and America spiraled into the Great Depression.
The famous images of stockbrokers throwing themselves out of windows and people running around in utter sort of woe and despair that they've lost all their money and these sort of bets gone wrong.
And it caused a great crisis of confidence and a great reckoning.
The flimsy house of cards of our prosperity collapsed. $50 billion went down the drain in the market crash. The man with a dollar bill was king, but he was awfully hard to find in the millions of unemployed.
The Wall Street crash in the Great Depression is considered one of the lowest points in American history. It affected people at all rungs. The wealthiest lost the most in terms of money, but it hit the poor the hardest by far.
By the early 1930s, 25% of Americans were unemployed.
In 1933, President Roosevelt came to America's rescue.
When America was in the depths of the Great Depression, it's Roosevelt who projects this image of activism and compassion, and he will use the power of the federal government to lift America out of the Depression.
He instituted a groundbreaking plan to kickstart recovery. It would become known as the New Deal.
FDR's main mission was to get Americans back to work.
He worked to develop a large series of programs and agencies that were created to help get the American economy running again.
By the middle of June, 300,000 boys were off the streets and out in the open working with the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC.
And people called it alphabet soup because he started so many federal programs with these acronyms, the SEC, the WPA, the TVA, and they were all designed in various ways to help America survive the Depression.
And his New Deal, while flawed in some ways, does a hell of a lot to alleviate the immediate crisis and bring Americans back to work.
Just the sight of men punching time clocks, of rolling production lines, was good news. The new cars were coming off the line at the rate of thousands per day, and the workmen were eating again.
But 1929 wouldn't be the last time America's stock market would crash.
The 1920s then really marks the start of a century-long pattern of boom and bust in the United States.
The financial crash of September 2008 was the worst U.S. economic disaster since the Great Depression.
Everyone down here is losing personal money. Our customers are losing money. We're seeing things that are unprecedented.
The Wall Street crash of 1929, the crash of 2007 to 8, I mean, they are linked to the same problem, which is that we have a system that will always be a bit of a roller coaster. I mean, that is inherent in the system.
As the stock market plummeted once again, Americans lost $9.8 trillion in wealth, sparking a global recession.
You're witnessing so much violent wealth loss. What people built up over years and years has been erased.
And in 2020, the financial cost of the COVID-19 crisis is still to be counted. But America always rebuilds.
I think America has a propensity for creating these kind of business titans because it has a belief in the entrepreneurial spirit. There's a willingness to take risk of trying a new idea, even if it might fail.
And sure enough, a whole new generation of entrepreneurs would emerge who would ultimately take America into the 21st century.
So the entire system's fully drag and drop, and everything is very fluid in that way.
Today, Silicon Valley in Northern California is America's center for technology and innovation. Its name comes from a huge concentration of electronics and computer companies that sprung up there from the 1950s.
In some ways, it's another gold rush. It takes place not far from where the first gold rush in California took place.
This is where we see the development of mass technology that the United States successfully markets to the entire world. Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, that brings massive wealth to the Silicon Valley sector.
Just as the Transcontinental Railway paved the way for industrial tycoons, has the tech revolution created its own robber barons.
The characters have changed, but the storyline is more or less the same. It's the story of a small handful of men accumulating vast amounts of wealth, controlling major industries.
There's a parallel there, I think, in terms of corporations really dominating their industries, perhaps to an unhealthy degree.
Inevitably, their accumulation of wealth also creates this divide between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots.
Today, Silicon Valley's current worth is over $2.8 trillion, selling its innovations all around the world.
Enter a new dimension.
I want you to take me on a tour to Earth.
We don't take passengers to non-existent destinations.
Where imagination is the only boundary.
My father's been replaced.
What the hell is that?
I'm not one of these people.
Who is he?
Based on the works of the legendary sci-fi writer.
Dreaming is not the same as wishing it's true.
Philip K. Dick's Electric Dreams. Tonight at 10:30 on viu96.
Let's try something new.
Ready, go.
The government will launch HKE toll. With this vehicle tag, there is no need to stop and queue. Tunnel tolls will be deducted from your account automatically. Vehicle owners who have registered in advance or applied through the HKE toll app will receive the tags and can for a start use them at the Chingchun control area. HKE toll will be rolled out at government toll tunnels in phases. Find more info online.
Drive smart with HKE toll.
So what did you order today? This is the brisket sandwich?
Yeah.
You got the fattiness, the juiciness. You have the burnt end, the smoky flavor. It's all there.
I don't know if I can say this, but I will slap the person who did this. It is so good.
That's how good it is.
Chef Craig Harding is combining a passion for classic Italian comfort food with a fresh, modern California spin. It's these delicious creations that have earned La Palma its reputation as one of Toronto's most buzzed-about restaurants. From the Cantonese-Peruvian mashup known as chifa to Nikkei, a distinct Peruvian-Japanese style of cooking developed over generations. This menu is a coast-to-coast journey of some of the best food you've ever had.
What do we got? So it's like a traditional nigiri, but we have Wagyu beef here.
Yes.
A little bit of a ponzu sauce and finished off with a quail egg.
It's so rich and delicious. I could destroy an entire tray of these. Tell me where we are today.
Third Coast Provision. Fresh seafood, wild caught. I come here every chance I get.
It's a high-end seafood restaurant that you could also come to casually, have a cocktail with a friend. Best seafood in the city.
10 out of 10 recommend.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Big Food Bucket List. Wednesday night at 8 on viu96. They're not born here, but they probably know Hong Kong better than you and me.
This place is such a great view. The workspace is quite closed. Sometimes at the end of the day, I'll maybe take the ferry for a change.
And they've probably been to places that we've never visited in town.
Yeah, Hong Kong has more opportunities, and I really love, I have free time, then I would just go somewhere.
They share their views and experiences, the most fascinating city in the East.
It's pretty spacious and modern.
Come and stay. Friday night at 7:30 on viu96.
America has given us some of the most famous cultural icons on the planet.
When we think of America, it's big, it's brash, it's bold. We think of burgers, skyscrapers, the Statue of Liberty.
Shopping malls, baseball.
A consumer culture of which we partake hungrily and not greedily.
Unlike any other country, America has exported its culture so successfully that it is now instantly recognizable all around the globe. So how did America transform itself into a global phenomenon? It all started when the country emerged as an economic powerhouse in the 1920s.
You get references to Americanization in a kind of global sense, really at the very early in the 20th century.
After the First World War, America has emerged on the world stage as a powerful economic force. But America needs export markets in order to sell.
America is increasingly looking overseas as a place to ship products, but also kind of ideas.
It's the moment when America becomes a truly global cultural and economic force.
You had the export of American values, American capitalism, American habits, American tastes.
And America found the perfect medium to do this.
The key to the successful export of American culture is Hollywood. I think Hollywood was this tremendous machine for manufacturing the American dream and then selling it in every corner of the planet.
What a lot of people outside the United States see is America through Hollywood's eyes. It is America for a lot of the world.
This is important, dear. Where can we be alone?
Well, why alone? I'm having fun.
It becomes a way of communicating American culture, American humor, American drama, and the drama of life in American cities through Hollywood film.
Today, Hollywood is a multi-billion-dollar industry and the showbiz capital of the world. It has brought us some of our most famous celebrities, but despite its glitzy status, Hollywood's origins are much more humble.
Hollywood started as a small farming settlement in the late 19th century. The farmers who went there discovered that the land maybe wasn't as fertile as they had hoped, and instead began to set up motion picture companies.
Even the world-famous Hollywood sign began life as a simple advert for a suburban housing development called Hollywoodland. More familiar to us today as the Hollywood Hills, it would become one of LA's most upmarket neighborhoods.
Many of the film producers and creators that moved to the Los Angeles, Hollywood area found that there was lots of natural backdrops for all sorts of different landscapes and a kind of freer attitude. They really found California to be a welcoming home.
The first film studio appeared on Sunset Boulevard, and Warner Brothers Studios soon followed in 1923. A booming film industry was born.
In the 20s and 30s, a sort of golden age emerged. There were motion pictures being made that incorporated sound for the first time.
I'll lock it down.
Thanks to its portrayal in film, America always seems bigger and more exciting and more glamorous than anything we could produce here. If you look in Britain in the 1920s and 30s, people would say, you know, thanks to Hollywood films, young people growing up in Britain now, they're eating American, talking American, thinking American, dreaming American.
The 1920s didn't just usher in Hollywood's golden age, it also saw the rise of America's most famous export, fast food.
Fast food And in particular, the hamburger is very synonymous with American culture.
It was a symbol of modernity. It's mass-produced, it's reliable, and it's cheap, and it's democratic. You know, it's all these kind of things that basically food isn't if you're eating a brasserie in Paris.
To turn this gastronomic delight into a cultural institution we know today, producers applied the same technique that Henry Ford was using in the car industry.
American fast food really got started through a company called White Castle, which was founded in Kansas in 1921. And what White Castle did was they brought the advanced technology of American mass production, the assembly line, to the hamburger.
Here, food preparation has been made into a science. Computers make the French fries. These and other technological innovations will help maintain the standards that the public has come to expect.
It was that real sort of American fascination with industry, efficiency, technology.
White Castle took this dining experience and transformed it into an American icon. Fast food was born.
That world of fast food, it's exciting, it's novel, it's modern. It became this globally recognized symbol of American capitalism. And it's all those kinds of things that people thought America represented.
To American troops.
During the war, U.S. forces are alleged to have drunk 5 billion bottles of Coke.
There was this real sense that Coca-Cola was one and the same with the American war effort. People outside the United States then began even more to associate Coca-Cola with American culture.
They've been able to export a glamorized notion of the American way of life. Coke is seen as America in a bottle.
The Second World War brought U.S. culture to the world.
America had just come out of the Second World War. It felt good about itself. It was confident. Well, a lot of people were doing very well in the 50s. They had more money to spend than ever before. There were more things to spend their money on.
With their newfound wealth, millions of Americans flocked to the suburbs.
In the 1950s, the idea of suburbia rose massively within American culture. Large numbers of middle class and upper middle class white Americans leave American cities for land outside of cities where they could have larger homes, larger space for children to play in. You see the idea of the white picket fence and front yard that's neatly manicured and a family with 2.3 children.
The so-called Levitt towns, modest, inexpensive, tract houses pioneered by the Levitt brothers, became a famous symbol of suburban life and the defining image of America in the 1950s. It was a culture and lifestyle that was envied around the world.
In the 50s, people abroad did start to get the idea of the sort of the perfect American life and the American dream. Britain, France, West Germany, and so on. I mean, these are bombed out, battered, tired countries. Now, by contrast, America is booming. America seems technicolor, Europe seems grey. If you got that flight from London to New York, it felt like you were flying 20 years forward in time.
In the 1950s, British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan said to the British electorate, "You've never had it so good," but Americans had always had it much better. You know, that they had refrigerators when we didn't, they had big supermarkets.
I think the 50s is the moment when that world becomes kind of recognized all across the globe, when people see, okay, you know, here is the suburban good life. That vision of America, which is so rooted in the 50s, is one that we all recognize.
And with the suburbs came another global export, Disneyland.
It's probably the most famous entertainment attraction in the world, Disneyland. Its enormous size is even more impressive from 1,000 feet up.
Anyone of my age who watches this will know what Disneyland meant when you were small. Disneyland has been this vision of pure pleasure, of innocent family fun.
It represents a lot and the prosperousness of American culture. And so it becomes a kind of
a culture.
That cultural dominance, America dominates the world. Culturally, financially.
We still can't quite sort of throw away the fantasy.
Segregation to the average Negro means being held back.
Happened that you never would even think would happen.
Trump has laid not go away. Of something that's coming, you know, in the 2020s, 2030s.
Coming up next, Philip K. Dick's Electric Dreams. When modern technology meets unusual artifacts.
Screaming mummies exist everywhere.
As you start to look closer, things.
This is every archaeologist's dream.
500-year-old, almost.
Are waiting to be discovered.
Mad ideas didn't seem so mad.
Revealing the amazing stories behind mysterious treasures.
What is it? Where did it come from?
Strangest Things. Wednesday night at 9:30 on viu96.
My friend and I started smoking in our teens. I quit 2 years ago after knowing he had a stroke. The doctor said there is a strong link between stroke and smoking. I get sick less often after quitting. Health is the most important thing for me and for my family. I will never smoke again.
Quit now.
Welcome to Winning Combination. I'm Omid Jalili.
A funny host.
When Meatloaf sang, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that, I was the